right, welcome back to On Texas Football, special live edition of On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. We just got done with the Steve Sarkisian press conference. CJ, this will probably be Sark's the last time we talked to him in this kind of setting this spring. So a lot to get into. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget, we got live stream tonight, all kinds of fun stuff coming up this week. We got draft, everything. But right now, we get to talk some good team stuff. And CJ, let's start with the quarterbacks, because I thought Sark gave some really good insight, not just on Arch Manning, but on KJ Lacey and Trey Owens, talking about both those guys, how really he said with all three of them, he said he saw it initially with Arch, but he's noticed this applies to Trey and KJ as well. The best he's seen them on the practice field is when they're in scrimmage situations. And, he specifically mentioned last Thursday before the team got to go home for an extended Easter break, talking about KJ Lacey's mobility, finally getting to see some of that mobility and athleticism. So, CJ, I'll take it as a good sign that all three quarterbacks are performing at their best in scrimmage situations when, as live as the Bullets, for lack of a better term, can be in spring practice, that's when those guys are thriving.
Yeah, you always like to hear your quarterback standing up when the lights get bright. And in this situation, Jeff, that's exactly what's happening, of course. He said, sometimes you see them maybe get a little lackadaisical, maybe a little errant at times whenever it's 7-on-7, whenever it's routes on air. But, hey, to their credit, when it's time to go and when those bullets start flying, they come to play. And I think that's what you would take, right? Hey, I'll take the trade-off of if my quarterbacks look their absolute best in game situations and settings like that, I think I take that 10 times out of 10. So that's a positive right now, especially for the younger guys, right? KJ Lacey, for Trey Owens, to know that environment doesn't get too big of a moment for them, positive for me. You're muted, Jeff.
My apologies. Give me one mark on the OSHA sign. This is a direct quote from Sark. I'm not paraphrasing here, but he said, and CJ, you can attest to this because you've been to enough Sark practices at this point. Sark's pretty vocal during routes on air, and his exact quote was, "I'm on their ass during routes on air," because he wants to see more accuracy. He wants to see it be better. So, it is, trust me, they're not taking it easy on the young guys. They're having to absorb a lot and perform. So, props to Trey Owens and KJ Lacey for getting it done. Of course, probably you'd expect it to come a little easier for Trey Owens since this is his second spring. But, man, CJ, we keep hearing about the positive returns from the 2025 class. And it seems like in every position, like, man, they got somebody here that's got a chance. They got somebody here that's got a chance. If you're not a believer in KJ Lacey, I think you can go ahead and throw him in there at this point as somebody that's got a chance to be a guy that can be a significant contributor for this program. And anytime you feel early on, even if you get an inkling that you got your quarterback eval right, we knew how critical these 2 years post-Arch were going to be in these two cycles between Arch and Diabell. Well, it sounds like they've done pretty well for themselves on quarterback evals.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of KJ Lacey. Again, I think just having that ability with the basketball background to come out and get the ball where it needs to go, when it needs to go there, is very underrated, right? We can talk about the baseball background. We could talk about making throws from any angle. But look, if you don't have that innate trait in you to say, hey, the window's closing on me, I got to get this ball out, it's a tough thing to develop, especially in football where you don't see as many live game situations as we've been talking about. So for KJ, look, number 2 all-time in Alabama high school passing for his career. I'm a big fan of that. I know Texas fans will always sit there and kind of compare with that of, a 5-star Duncanville quarterback that ended up at Alabama last cycle. But point being, I think right now, early on, this is a very strong first spring for KJ Lacey as a Longhorn.
I said it before, I'll say it again. Post-Arch, you're going to have 2 guys in those 2 classes, especially in the 24 class, had a lot of confidence, really confident in themselves, knowing what they were walking into. So, again, can't say enough good things so far about Trey Owens and KJ Lacey and the quarterback pipeline that Sark is developing. A lot of draft talk today, and we'll try to get to some of that in the time we've got. But, CJ, real quick on the quarterbacks, I think it's important to note that Sark has talked about Arch's biggest area of growth. We know the physical traits are there. We know he knows the offense as much as one can at this point. It's all about leadership with him. And Sark made a great point again. Hey, the first way you start by being a good leader is by doing the right thing. And it's easier if you're a really good player to be a good leader. That transition is better. So, Arch has never had a problem working hard. He's never had a problem studying. But, Arch has even talked about Neil Brown, how huge he's been developing the leadership. It's good to hear, CJ. We're not talking about a quarterback that's slacking on mechanics or there's some physical issue or he's having problems reading this coverage or processing or whatever. It just seems to all be about with Arch, just getting him ready and preparing him, because he is sitting at the head of the table, but continuing to make sure that you're fostering good leadership with the guy who is your overall team leader by default at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting what Sark said. He said, look, everybody's voice echoes differently. And what does that mean? Well, to your point, if you're a frontline guy, if you're an Anthony Hill, a Colin Simmons, a Michael Taft, right, your voice is going to triculate throughout the chambers of Moncrief a little bit louder than some of those younger cats. And so for Arch Manning to be the face of the program, the quarterback of the team, his voice is going to be heard by just about everybody. And right now, that's, again, continuing that next step for him as a leader is going to be the goal of these final two practices moving into the summer. And Jeff, he mentioned, when these guys go back home, are they making sure that they're following their workout regimen? Are they going and maintaining their bodies? That was an issue last year for a few guys who are no longer with the team. But point being, if you're the quarterback, you got to have these guys in the group chat saying, hey, go get your routes. Send me some tape of you running, of you doing stairs, of whatever, right? Some bleachers. For Arch Manning, it sounds like that's what the staff's trying to get more out of, which is funny because all the way up until practice 13 this morning, that's what we had heard a lot about with Arch Manning this spring.
Yeah, and, you made a good point right there. CJ Sark talked about it, and he was asked about it. After Saturday, which Saturday, by the way, it's going to be as much of a normal practice as there can be in spring ball. Sark did say the one kind of difference, if there is one, is they're going to simulate as many game-like situations as possible, so a lot of situational scrimmaging. But it's going to be a practice for all intents and purposes in lieu of the spring game. But after that, once guys get a chance to go home, to your point, CJ, there were guys last year that might have made progress in spring ball, but from the time they left campus after finals to the time they came back for summer conditioning, it's almost like they had lost a good chunk of the gains they had made. You don't want that to happen. So it's Sark again. They're sticklers for that. And I think it's just interesting that a lot of the really good leaders you've had over the last 2 years are gone now. It's a new leadership core. So I think depending on what we hear, CJ, from guys coming back for summer conditioning, I think that'll tell you a lot about the leadership on this team and if guys are responding, and quite frankly, how many guys they might go home. I know some of these guys are going to have to walk at their high school graduations and then come back, but how many guys come back with either maybe ahead or at least on par with where they were when they exited spring ball? That's to your point. That's something that Arch and the quarterback specifically, a lot of it's on Arch, but the other team leaders to make sure that, hey, let's not take any steps back, because again, it's not like you're opening with, San Jose State or, somebody that ULM or somebody that you can, kind of roll out of the rack and beat. You got to go to Columbus. You got to go to the Horseshoe for that first game of the year. So it's full throttle from here on out. Yeah,
absolutely. Again, Texas has been good. And the one reason for optimism moving into the summer is what Sark said, right after this. Look, we got a hungry team. And I think Texas was hungry last year, right? Made it to the Final Four. You lose on a goal line situation to Washington. You come back and you got that taste, right? Sarkeesian talked about being basically addicted to winning or addicted to competing for national championships, and to get to that close, right? They talked about conquering the mountaintop. Look, I can't imagine getting there twice for some of these older guys and not experiencing kind of that hype around a national championship game. So I think that's what's going to drive this group. And of course, we've talked about it. Some of the leaders, I would imagine they divvy them up between position groups. Say, hey, you're in charge of your guys in your room. Arch for you, for Michael Taft. I might be in charge of the entire unit. Uh-oh.
How bad? I had a red wasp landing on my arm.
Don't like that.
No, I almost ate it too on this lawn. But no, we're good. We're good.
But to the point, to have as many guys as Texas has with leadership capabilities, that should be what keeps this team afloat moving into the summer months.
Yeah, we will. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in right now again to this special live edition of On Texas Football. Really quick, got to mention, if you're not a member over at OnTexasFootball.com, get over there right now. Use the promo code OTFOG. When you sign up, that'll get you 1 year of access at OnTexasFootball.com for $49.95. So get over there right now. Use that promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year on the site, and plenty of good stuff, especially as we've got June official visits coming up. And CJ, after that, before we'll have all the summer workout intel. But after those official visits are over, SEC media days and camp will be here before you know it. So, yes, Justin, I agree wholeheartedly. So make sure you get over to ontexasfootball.com if you're not already. We've talked plenty about quarterbacks today. Let's talk about some of the other positions. You asked Sark about the edge room and maybe a meatier answer than you were expecting.
Yeah, a little bit. And I only asked this question because, look, you look at the original listings on the Texas website. Texas only has 6 edges, right? A few of them have been dinged up, right? No Zena for the latter half of spring ball. We haven't seen Colton Vosick at all as a result of some offseason work that he had to get cleaned up. So really it's Colin Simmons, it's Ethan Burke, and then you got Lance Jackson. But I thought Sark actually gave a pretty good answer here. He said, yeah, we got a lot of versatility in that front 7 by itself, right? We can spin back down a Trey Moore. We can spin down a Brad Spence. We can move out a Justice Terry from the interior to the edge. And again, only at 265, 270 pounds right now for Terry. That makes a lot of sense to be at that level playing off the edge. And he said, oh, yeah, by the way, we also got a guy named Anthony Hill who had 7.5 or 8 sacks last year. We can let him play off the edge at times and go get the quarterback. And Jeff, I know you've talked about it. I know Rod's talked about it. When it comes to win rate, someone's driving fast. The point being, Anthony Hill, one of those guys that you want rushing the passer. So it wasn't necessarily a lack of confidence in the room. It's, okay, what can this room also evolve into from a pure numbers perspective? Because we know Texas didn't bring David Bailey in, the Stanford edge, out of the portal in on accident. So will they continue to look for an edge rusher? Right now, it sounds like that versatility at least alleviates maybe some of the concern from a body perspective going into the summer.
Yeah, and you'll get Vosick back at some point. You know, Zena's been working his way back from the thumb issue. And again, the Brad Spence comment really intrigued me. And we know Anthony Hill can play on the edge because we've seen him do it. But the Brad Spence comment, CJ, has me intrigued. Again, we talked about, you know, the size and the versatility and the skill sets of these linebackers. And now the fact that Sark is basically saying without saying it, like, yeah, it's an option to use some of these guys, hypothetically, at least situationally, at edge. I'm not super comfortable with the numbers. I don't have warm fuzzies about the numbers, but it makes me feel a little bit better. Like, hey, they're not just counting on, well, we'll just go get a body from the portal. No, within what they've got, they feel like they can make it work. And I think this tells you, CJ, if Texas doesn't target another edge, now, David Bailey was different because that would have been the opportunity to add a difference maker out of the portal, which we know those guys, when they come available in the spring window, at least pre-house settlement, you're going to have to pay a premium for those guys if you want difference makers at certain positions, especially a premium position like edge. But, you know, those guys don't come open very often. But unless one comes up, if they don't recruit another edge, I think that's going to tell you a lot about how they feel about Lance Jackson and Justice Terry. Not that we're not counting Smith the Robo, but we know he's working back from the knee issue he had. But I think that tells you a lot about those two guys. And we talked about it, CJ. Hey, how are you going to find snaps for those guys? I don't think that process is going to be as nuanced as maybe we thought it would be.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you use those 3 linebackers off the edge, because to speak on Lance Jackson, look, Colin Simmons, it was only about 4 or 5 days ago, Jeff, where he called him a future first-round pick, and I know that's high praise for a young guy, but that's kind of the sentiment that we've been hearing is he's been playing very well. He's been elevating his play to whatever team that he's been getting snaps with, whether that be second, whether that be third. Haven't seen him a whole lot with the first just yet, but it's a great sign for a former 5-star guy playing off the edge at 270 pounds. The athleticism will remain. Now the point becomes, how high of a ceiling does this room have collectively? And I would say as long as you have a Colin Simmons, as long as you have a Trey Moore in that room, the ceiling's going to be pretty high. It's all about finding those snaps, those reps, those pass rushing guys when they aren't on the field.
Yeah, I still think Ethan Burke is capable of having, I'll say around, 7.5 plus sack type year. I really think Ethan Burke could have that type of year. Will he have the opportunities to get those? Because everybody has to eat. So will the numbers add up? I don't know, but I think Ethan Burke as a pass rusher can get that done. And if he can be better against the run, more consistent against the run, he's gotten more consistent as his career has gone on. That's going to make it tougher for those young guys to get snaps. But it just speaks to the talent throughout that edge room, whether you're talking about vets, newcomers, true freshman that should still be in high school right now. Like Lance Jackson should be playing high school baseball right now. He and Jonah Williams should be on a high school baseball diamond, not one playing over at Dish Falk and the other one at Deanie is getting ready to wrap up spring practice. Do want to talk about receivers, though, because this morning over at On Texas Football, Bobby had a note about some of the freshman receivers, some of the newcomer receivers. And it's kind of the gift and the curse, CJ, to me. Sark and Chris Jackson, they're going to teach that position conceptually. And there's a lot you've got to digest before you're ready to rock and roll as a wide receiver in this system. And I like the Sark pointed it out. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, we've got Sark's opening statement. Let's play that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk receivers, and we'll talk about some of the new portal additions that Sark mentioned. But let's go ahead and get Sark's opening statement. Hear that. We've got that clip ready.
Okay, so we're obviously in the final week of spring practice, and we really just want to maximize these final 3 days, which I thought we did a pretty good job of that with the start of it today. I think everybody in the organization has a thing, 2, 3, 10 that we can improve upon, and if we can really focus in on those things over the next few days, all the way through Saturday morning, I think we'll be in a lot better place come June when we come back and start our summer program as we get ready for fall camp. So it's been a good spring up to this point. A lot of guys have improved, but as I've said early on, and we never should be in spring, we're not a finished product, and nobody is as individuals. We're clearly not in any phase of our team right now. So we got work to do, but I appreciate the guys coming with the right intent like they did this morning.
CJ, that's probably as good of a segue as any to talk about the wide receivers. Like we said, it's teaching it conceptually. There's a lot to digest. Maybe those guys have hit a little bit of a wall, but Sark mentioned it later. He said it's kind of unfair to those guys because whether you're talking about Khaleke Lockett, Jamie French, Dalen McCutcheon, Michael Terry, those guys haven't had the veteran presence that like a Ryan Wingo had last year, or that anybody's had to this point that DeAndre Moore had when he came in, because, Ryan Wingo got a couple of practices before the hamstring issue popped up, and he's been kind of in and out. DeAndre Moore recovering from his issue. He's been out most of the spring, so it's kind of a trial by fire for those receivers, which at the end you feel like it's going to benefit them. But CJ, just some rough days that some of these freshman wide receivers are having to work through right now.
Yeah. Again, I think that comes with it. And for a lot of these guys, for the young wide receivers specifically, they're thrust into a lot of situations where you have to have your, the mental side of things further along than your physical side, which it might get a little frustrating because you've always been the best athlete wherever you've come from, to come out here and to go against a Manny Muhammad, a Jelani McDonald, some of these guys in the Texas secondary, I would imagine not very tough. On top of that, you got to learn a brand new system, probably multiple positions, the ins and out, the vernacular, everything is piling up on these guys. So 13 practices in, this is probably around the time that you start to hear the lull. You could see the end in sight for a lot of them. But one thing I really like about what Sark said, Jeff, is, hey, we try to put these guys in as many game-like situations as possible. And he singled out a Thursday instance in which, there's a young wide receiver and a young running back catching passes on 3rd and 4th and shorts and not picking up the line to gain. I think only being able to go through those type of situations live early on in your career, I guarantee those two guys don't want to be singled out in tape, in practice, in front of their teammates again in that instance. So it's a good stepping stone to where they need to be for the fall. But point being, yeah, the bumps and the bruises are going to come for when your team is really young. And again, I've echoed this the entire spring. Texas is a very young team, especially in comparison to recent years. These are going to come. Glad they're getting them out of the way in the spring.
Yeah, and we'll break down more of this tonight on the Tuesday live stream, which I believe, CJ, are you on that tonight? I know we've had so we had to shuffle some things around, but I believe that's going to be myself, CJ, and Rod Babers on the live stream tonight. We'll continue to break down the Sark press conference from today that CJ and I are recapping right now, that we just wrapped up over at Moncrief, over a couple blocks from where I am right now, from where CJ is right now. But CJ, we'll wrap this up talking about the portal additions and sticking with wide receivers. He mentioned Emmett Mosley, and Sark said he was a guy that they actually evaluated and liked, but then he got hurt his senior year and they backed off. He ended up having a really good freshman year, as we know, at Stanford. He goes into the portal, and Sark said it was kind of a no-brainer for them to go after him. But as much of a need as Emmett Mosley was and as receiver was, I don't know if you're in agreement with me, but I think Jack Endress was probably the biggest need Texas had. You had to come out of this with a tight end, and preferably one that had some experience. And you got a guy that was a productive tight end in a power conference who probably is just scratching the surface of the kind of player he can be, going to a tight end friendly offense the tight end friendly offense that Sark runs. CJ Sark made no bones about it, man. Getting Jack Endress, he was a priority the minute he got into the portal.
Yeah, I mean, look at what he's been able to do. Right, 1,000 yards the last 2 seasons. He's had 3 different offensive coordinators too, Jeff. So he's been asked to do different things at all 3 years of his college career. Now he knows, at least at Texas, it's going to be Sarkeesian who, a little side note, Sark said, all decisions will be made by me, whether it be on the field, whether it be player personnel. I sign off on everything. I am my own GM. I know that question came in terms of some of the changing landscape for the college football world, but Sark's, Jack Endress came out here and said, I want a playmaking guy, a proven guy, an older guy for that room, because right now there, quite frankly, is not one. Going back to Emmett Mosley, a guy that Texas recruited, made a pretty strong push for late in that recruiting cycle. Knee injury deterred their route out of high school, of course, but of course, to get him back on campus, after the season he had last year as a true freshman at Stanford, he's going to have some bountiful weapons coming this fall.
Yeah, so Texas has a couple of scholarships left to use in the portal. At least right now, we'll see if anybody jumps in whenever the portal closes. Which CJ, when are we getting ready to close the portal? It's a couple of days. My days are confused. Is it Friday?
4 days away.
Yeah, 4 days away. So that'll be before the spring game. And again, Sark's looking forward to fan day and everything. But they'll have a normal practice Saturday morning. They'll have some recruits on campus this weekend, which we'll talk about that. You, Jerry, and I will on the recruiting breakdown, which will be out later today. And again, we'll be talking about this on the live stream tonight, on Coffee and Football tomorrow. We talk about everything going on this weekend, including that big baseball series at Dishfalk against Texas A&M. But CJ, any closing thoughts here as we wrap this up?
Yeah, again, just as the spring comes to a close, there's an emphasis on maintaining where you're at. Don't take a step back going into the summer, and when you go leave campus when school is out, making sure that you continue to build each day, especially for a young team, very important. And to hear that from Sark now 2 weeks in a row, I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, the last thing I'll mention to something you just talked about, CJ Sark was asked, specifically about Andrew Luck, and we've seen how things are running in Norman now with Jim Nagy. It certainly seems like he's got the final decision. Sark was asked, "Hey, is the dynamic going to change?" He said, "Not as long as I'm head coach." So, Brandon Harris is involved. He's got a pretty big role. Sark mentioned J.M. Jones has a pretty big role. When you're talking about personnel, and Sark, loves recruiting, loves building a roster, but there's no question where the buck stops on the 40 acres. It stops with Steve Sarkisian, and Sark is going to have the final say. So I don't think anybody's got to worry about, the right hand knowing what the left hand's doing, because Sark is controlling all of it. So I think everybody should feel pretty good about it. All right, CJ, thank you for the time and the knowledge. As always, big thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for doing what he does, the best producer in what we do in terms of bringing you great video content here. Happen without people like Matthew. And thank you to the entire On Texas Football staff and to everybody that tuned in for this special live edition of On Texas Football. Don't forget Tuesday night live stream coming up tonight at 7:15. And if there's anything we don't cover tonight, Bobby, Jerry, and Blake will get to it first thing in the morning on Coffee and Football. Make sure you stay locked into the channel. Stay locked into OnTexasFootball.com. Thank you for watching. For CJ Vogel, I'm Jeff Howe. And until next time, welcome.